Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Dark stubble shadowed a strong jawline. Short brown hair tousled from restless sleep. Broad shoulders stretched the fabric of a plain white t-shirt. But something in the eyes, a spark of longing, a flicker of something unfulfilled, hinted at deeper complexities beneath the surface. With a weary sigh, he turned away from his reflection. Another day of pretending, of forcing himself into a mold that never quite fit. He opened the closet door, pushing aside the array of dull shirts and slacks that made up his public wardrobe. Hidden in the back, carefully concealed behind winter coats, was a garment bag. His fingers trembled slightly as he unzipped it, revealing a flash of vibrant fabric within. For just a moment, he allowed himself to imagine. Soft silk against his skin, delicate lace at his throat, the swish of a skirt around his legs as he walked. In his mind's eye, he saw long hair cascading over his shoulders, lips painted a bold red. He saw grace and beauty where the mirror showed only hard angles. But it was just a fantasy. With reluctance, he zipped the bag closed again and reached for his usual attire. Dark slacks, button-down shirt, tie knotted with practiced motions. Armor to face another day in a world that didn't understand. At work, he went through the motions. Meetings blurred together, punctuated by polite small talk around the water cooler. He nodded and smiled at the right moments, offered the expected comments on sports and weather. All the while, an internal monologue raged. "This isn't me," a voice whispered in the back of his mind. "This isn't who I'm meant to be." But what was the alternative? He had no words to describe the feelings that plagued him, the sense of disconnect between his outer appearance and inner self. Was he broken somehow? Was there something wrong with him for wanting something else? He'd tried to bury these thoughts, to convince himself he was just going through a phase, but the longings persisted, growing stronger with each passing year. Sometimes he wondered if he was losing his mind. That evening, he stopped at the grocery store on his way home. As he browsed the aisles, a flash of color caught his eye. A young woman stood examining produce, her floral sundress swaying gently as she moved. For a moment, envy twisted in his gut, not of her beauty, but of her freedom to simply be herself. He quickly looked away, ashamed of his reaction. This was ridiculous. He was a grown man, for heaven's sake. He needed to get a grip on himself. At home, he heated up a microwave dinner and flipped aimlessly through TV channels. Nothing held his interest. His gaze kept drifting to the closet door, to the secrets hidden within. Finally, he could resist no longer. He retrieved the garment bag with trembling hands. Inside was a simple black dress. Nothing fancy, just something he'd ordered online in a moment of weakness. He'd never actually worn it. Just owning it felt simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. Heart pounding, he slipped the dress over his head. The fabric settled around him, soft and unfamiliar. He closed his eyes, allowing himself to imagine. If things were different, if he were different. Cautiously, he approached the full-length mirror on the back of the bathroom door. His breath caught in his throat. The dress hung awkwardly on his masculine frame, emphasizing rather than disguising his broad shoulders and lack of curves. And yet, there was something there, a hint of the person he longed to be. Tears pricked at his eyes. He sank to the floor, overwhelmed by a tidal wave of emotions he couldn't even begin to untangle. Grief for a life unlived, anger at a world that didn't understand, fear of rejection if anyone ever discovered his secret, and underneath it all, a tiny spark of hope. That maybe someday he could find a way to bridge the gap between who he was and who he longed to be. He didn't know how long he sat there, lost in thought. Eventually, he rose and carefully removed the dress, tucking it away in its hiding place once more. Tomorrow would be another day of pretending. But for now, he allowed himself to dream of a future where he could be true to himself. As days turned to weeks, he found himself spending more time lost in fantasy. He created elaborate scenarios in his mind, imagining a different life. In these daydreams, he was graceful and confident, moving through the world with an ease he'd never known. He pictured himself with long hair and curves where now there were only angles. Sometimes, late at night when sleep eluded him, he would pull out his phone and lose himself in online forums and videos. He discovered a whole world of people who seemed to share his feelings, who spoke of gender identity and transition. The terminology was new to him, but something resonated deep in his soul. Still, he hesitated to put a label on his experiences. It felt too big, too life-altering to acknowledge. What would it mean for his job, his family, his entire identity? So he continued to hide, to present a facade to the world while his true self remained locked away. One evening, restless energy drove him out of his apartment. He found himself wandering the city streets, no particular destination in mind. The anonymity of the crowd was oddly comforting. Here, he could be anyone. No one knew his name, his history, the secrets he carried. His feet led him to a small boutique tucked away on a side street. The window display caught his eye. A mannequin posed in a flowing silk blouse and tailored trousers. It was an elegant, feminine look, but not overly frilly. Before he could talk himself out of it, he pushed open the door. A bell chimed softly as he entered. The shop was empty, save for a middle-aged woman arranging items on a shelf. She turned at his entrance, offering a warm smile. "Good evening," she said. "Can I help you find anything?" He froze, suddenly unsure what to say. His heart raced as he scrambled for an excuse. I'm looking for a gift. For my sister." The woman's smile never faltered. "Of course. Did you have anything particular in mind?" He gestured vaguely toward the window display. "Something like that, maybe? She likes that style." "Excellent choice. We have several similar pieces. What size does your sister wear?" He blinked, realizing he hadn't thought this through. About my size, actually." If the shopkeeper found this strange, she gave no indication. She simply nodded and began pulling items from the racks. "These should work nicely then. The fitting room is right over there if you'd like to check the fit. Sometimes it's easier than trying to guess." He hesitated, torn between desire and fear. "I don't know." The woman's expression softened. "It's all right, dear. Take your time. There's no pressure here." Something in her tone hinted at understanding. He wondered how many others like him had come through these doors, seeking a safe space to explore. Gathering his courage, he accepted the pile of clothing and stepped into the fitting room. His hands shook as he unbuttoned his shirt. He avoided looking in the mirror as he slipped on the silk blouse. Finally, he forced himself to look. The image that greeted him took his breath away. The blouse draped elegantly over his frame, softening his features. For the first time, he could see a glimpse of his true self shining through. Tears welled in his eyes. It wasn't perfect. His body still didn't match the image in his mind. But it was a start. A tiny step toward authenticity. He tried on the rest of the outfits, each one bringing a fresh wave of emotion. By the time he emerged from the fitting room, his cheeks were damp, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. The shopkeeper took in his appearance with a gentle smile. "Find anything you like?" He nodded, not quite trusting his voice. "Wonderful. Your sister is very lucky to have such a thoughtful sibling." He managed a shaky laugh. "Thank you. I think I'll take these two." He gestured to the blouse and a pair of wide-legged trousers. As she rang up his purchase, the woman slipped a business card into the bag. "We host a support group here on Thursday evenings, if you're interested. It's a safe space for people exploring gender identity and expression." He stared at her, a mix of gratitude and fear washing over him. "How did you know?" She smiled kindly. "Let's just say you're not the first person to come in shopping for a sister. My door is always open if you need someone to talk to." He left the shop in a daze, clutching his purchase like a lifeline. That night, he carefully hung the new clothes in his closet. For the first time, they weren't hidden away. It was a small act of defiance against years of shame and secrecy. The business card sat on his nightstand, both temptation and challenge. He wasn't ready to take that step yet, but knowing the option existed brought a measure of comfort. Over the next few weeks, he found himself returning to the boutique. Each visit brought new discoveries: a scarf that added a touch of elegance, a sweater that hugged his body in just the right way. The shopkeeper, whose name he learned was Evelyn, always greeted him with warmth and acceptance. Slowly, he began to build a wardrobe that reflected his true self. At first, he only wore the clothes in the privacy of his apartment. But as his confidence grew, he started venturing out for late-night walks, reveling in the freedom to be himself under cover of darkness. One evening, he found himself lingering outside a small cafe. Through the window, he could see a group of people gathered, laughing and chatting. His hand went to his pocket where Evelyn's business card was tucked away. This was the night and place of the support group she'd mentioned. For long moments, he stood frozen on the sidewalk. Part of him longed to go inside, to finally meet others who might understand. But fear held him back. What if someone recognized him? What if they laughed or rejected him? As he wavered, the cafe door opened and a person stepped out. They were tall and willowy, with close-cropped hair dyed a vibrant blue. Their outfit was an eclectic mix of masculine and feminine elements. They noticed him hovering and offered a friendly smile. "First time?" they asked gently. "It can be scary, I know. But I promise everyone inside is really welcoming. No pressure, though. You can just observe if you want." He hesitated, then nodded. I think I'd like that." The stranger held the door open with an encouraging gesture. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The cafe was warm and inviting, filled with the aroma of coffee and freshly baked goods. About a dozen people were gathered in a loose circle, some perched on overstuffed armchairs, while others sat cross-legged on floor cushions. A hush fell over the group as he entered. He felt a moment of panic, certain he'd made a terrible mistake. But then smiles broke out around the circle, and several people waved in greeting. "Welcome," said a woman with silver-streaked hair. "I'm Maggie, the group facilitator. Please, make yourself comfortable. We're just about to start introductions." He sank into an empty chair, heart pounding. As the introductions went around the circle, he was struck by the diversity of the group. There were people of all ages, backgrounds, and stages of transition. Some, like him, were just beginning to explore their identity. Others had been living authentically for years. When it came to his turn, he stumbled over his words. I'm not sure what name to use yet. I've been questioning my gender identity for a while now. This is all very new to me." Maggie smiled warmly. "That's perfectly all right. Many of us have been exactly where you are. You're safe here to explore and figure things out at your own pace." As the meeting progressed, he found himself relaxing. People shared their experiences, their triumphs and setbacks. He was amazed by their openness and courage. For the first time, he didn't feel alone in his struggles. After the formal meeting ended, people broke into smaller groups to chat. He hung back, still feeling a bit overwhelmed. The blue-haired person who'd greeted him outside approached with a gentle smile. "I'm glad you decided to come in," they said. "I'm Sam, by the way. They, them pronouns." He introduced himself, stumbling a bit over pronouns. "I'm not really sure what mine are yet," he admitted. Sam nodded, understanding. "That's totally okay. It can take time to figure these things out. Is there a name you'd like us to use for now?" He hesitated. He'd been turning possibilities over in his mind for weeks now, but hadn't dared speak any aloud. I think I'd like to try Emily," he said softly. "It's nice to meet you, Emily," Sam replied, and the name sent a thrill through him. It felt right in a way he couldn't quite explain. As the weeks passed, Emily became a regular at the support group meetings. She, for Emily had decided to use she'd her pronouns, at least within the safety of the group, found herself opening up more, sharing her fears and hopes. The others listened without judgment, offering advice and encouragement. She began to experiment more with her appearance. She learned makeup techniques from YouTube tutorials, practicing for hours in front of the mirror. She ordered a wig online, marveling at how different she looked with long hair framing her face. There were setbacks, of course. Days when dysphoria hit hard and she could barely look at herself in the mirror. Moments of panic when she imagined how her family might react if they knew. But slowly, steadily, she was becoming more comfortable in her own skin. One evening, as the support group was wrapping up, Maggie approached her. "Emily, I wanted to let you know about an upcoming event. It's a weekend retreat for trans and gender non-conforming folks. It's a chance to spend a few days fully presenting as yourself, surrounded by a supportive community. Would you be interested?" Emily's heart raced at the idea. A whole weekend of being herself without having to hide? It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. I don't know," she said hesitantly. "I'm not sure I'm ready for something like that." Maggie patted her arm gently. "That's all right. Just think about it. The offer is there if you decide you want to go." That night, Emily tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The idea of the retreat consumed her thoughts. Part of her longed to go, to have the chance to fully embrace her identity. But another part was paralyzed with fear. What if she wasn't trans enough? What if she realized this wasn't really who she was? She reached for her phone, pulling up the contact for her newest friend. Sam answered on the second ring. "Emily, is everything okay?" She poured out her conflicted feelings about the retreat. Sam listened patiently, offering reassurance. "It's normal to be scared," they said. "But Emily, I've seen how much happier you've been since you started coming to the group. You light up when you talk about exploring your identity. I think this retreat could be really good for you." Emily took a deep breath. "You really think so?" "I do. And hey, if you decide to go, I'll be there too. You won't be alone." That was the tipping point. Knowing she'd have a friend there helped calm her nerves. "Okay," she said, "I'll do it." The next few weeks were a flurry of preparation. Emily shopped for new outfits, wanting to have options for the weekend. She practiced walking in heels, giggling at her wobbling attempts. She even ventured to a salon where a kind stylist helped her choose a wig that complemented her features. As the day of the retreat approached, Emily's excitement began to overtake her nervousness. For the first time, she allowed herself to really imagine a future where she could live as her true self full-time. It was a thrilling, terrifying prospect. The morning of the retreat dawned bright and clear. Emily stood in front of her mirror, carefully applying makeup. She'd chosen a simple sundress for the drive up, not wanting to draw too much attention on the road. Her hands shook slightly as she fastened her necklace. A honk from outside startled her. Sam had offered to drive, knowing Emily might be too nervous. Taking one last look in the mirror, Emily grabbed her suitcase and headed out. Sam greeted her with a warm hug. "You look beautiful," they said sincerely. "Are you ready for this?" Emily took a deep breath and nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." The drive to the retreat center took about 2 hours. As they got further from the city, Emily felt some of her tension melting away. The scenery was beautiful, all rolling hills and forests beginning to show hints of autumn color. They pulled into the retreat center in the early afternoon. It was a rustic lodge surrounded by cabins nestled in a clearing in the woods. Emily saw other cars in the parking lot, people unloading luggage. Her nerves fluttered again. Sam squeezed her hand. "You've got this. Remember, everyone here is on a similar journey." They checked in and were directed to their cabin. Emily was relieved to find she had a private room. She wasn't quite ready to share such an intimate space. She took her time unpacking, carefully hanging up the outfits she'd brought. A welcome mixer was scheduled for that evening. Emily changed into a blouse and skirt combo, taking extra care with her makeup and wig. She scrutinized her reflection, still seeing traces of her male features, but choosing to focus on the growing glimpses of her true self. The main lodge was buzzing with activity when she arrived. Dozens of people mingled, laughing and chatting. Emily hovered near the door, suddenly overwhelmed. But then she spotted Sam waving her over to a small group. "Everyone, this is my friend Emily," Sam said. "It's her first time at one of these events." The others greeted her warmly. Emily relaxed as she listened to them swap stories and jokes. She was struck by how ordinary it all felt, just a group of friends hanging out. The fact that they were all transgender or non-binary wasn't the focus, just a shared background. As the evening wore on, Emily found herself opening up more. She shared some of her own experiences, her fears and hopes for the future. The others listened with empathy, offering encouragement and advice. "I remember my first retreat," said a woman named Jen. "I was terrified, but it was also the first time I really felt like myself. It gets easier, I promise." By the time Emily returned to her cabin that night, her cheeks ached from smiling. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen and accepted. It was an incredible feeling. The rest of the weekend passed in a blur of workshops, social events, and heart-to-heart conversations. Emily attended sessions on everything from voice training to navigating legal name changes. She swapped makeup tips with new friends and had deep discussions about gender theory. One afternoon, she even worked up the courage to go swimming. Putting on a women's swimsuit was a vulnerable moment, but the joy of feeling the water against her skin made it worthwhile. She splashed in the lake with the others, laughing freely in a way she hadn't since childhood. On the final evening of the retreat, there was a celebratory dinner and dance. Emily chose her favorite outfit, a slinky black dress that made her feel elegant and feminine. She'd always avoided dancing before, feeling awkward in her body. But tonight, she let the music move her, twirling and laughing with her new friends. As she caught her breath between songs, she noticed her reflection in a window. For a moment, she didn't recognize herself. The person staring back at her was radiant, confident, alive in a way she'd never seen before. Tears pricked at her eyes as the realization hit her. This was who she was meant to be all along. The drive home was bittersweet. Emily was sad to leave the safety of the retreat, but also excited to take her next steps. She and Sam chatted the whole way back, making plans for the future. "I think I'm ready," Emily said softly as they neared the city. "Ready to start transitioning for real, to live as my true self." Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.